Hello and welcome to La Excellence Hyderabad and Bangalore. This is the daily news analysis for 14th May 2020. The admissions for the online live general studies prelims cum mains batch for 2021 have started. Please direct your queries to the number given here. As usual, the news analysis is divided into two parts. Under daily editorial enrichment program, we are going to discuss the important editorial articles that have come in the newspaper today. And the rest of the important articles in the newspaper will be discussed under Targeted News Analysis or TNA. So the title for the first article for our discussion is A Plan to Revive the Broken Economy. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to the COVID-19 lockdown and the dimension is the fiscal steps to be taken to revive the economy. So what does this article say? This article starts out by criticizing the present economic package that has been released by Mr. Prime Minister, and then it moves forward and gives us a way forward about how the government should function itself at the moment. The third thing this article talks about is the importance of homegrown growth. That is, the growth must be coming from within India, and how this homegrown growth can be spurred from the rural India as well as from the urban India. These 2 points this article tells us. And lastly, this article talks about the different avenues of funding or the resources that we can garner in order to take the steps of homegrown growth. So the Prime Minister has recently announced the Lockdown 4.0. He also said that this Lockdown 4.0 is going to be categorically different from the previous lockdowns because this Lockdown 4.0 will try to open up the economic activity in a phased manner. In addition to Lockdown 4.0, he also has announced a package of 20 lakh crore for the benefit of economic activity. And in addition to this, the Prime Minister in his speech has also given monetary policy directives and instructions to banks and non-banking financial companies so that they would lend more and spur the economic activity or increase the economic activity as such. The nitty-gritties of the financial package has been discussed by the Finance Minister, but upon close analysis, if we look at what the Finance Minister has said, there is no additional public expenditure that is taking place. This is to say that the government is not going for additional spending, which is very urgently required at this point of time in order to revive the economy. So this is something that is not good for the economy is what this article starts out by saying. Now that it has pointed out the criticism in relation to the recent economic package, this article moves forward and talks about what the government should do immediately in terms of the fiscal policy to revive the economy and also to revive the livelihoods of the people. The first thing this article suggests is that we have to provide free food and cash transfers to those people who are rendered incomeless. Because of the lockdown restrictions, a lot of people have come out of the employment, especially the migrant workers have no income at all. In such a situation, it is imperative that the government should provide free food and cash transfer to these people who have no income as such. In order to support its view, this article basically talks about a small mathematical calculation. If we provide every household with 7,000 rupee per month for a period of 3 months, it was only going to cost us about 3% of our GDP. And this kind of spending we can always do for the benefit of people, and this money can be financed by borrowing of the center from the Reserve Bank of India. Now one might ask that the FRBM Act basically prevents the government from taking money from the RBI or printing currency from the RBI. But in extreme cases, it is allowed for the government to do so, so it is not a problem. In addition to this, the government should basically support the state governments so that the state governments can undertake their own activities and schemes in order to spur or generate the economic activity. The first and foremost thing which the government should do, which the central government should do, is to pay out the goods and service tax compensation. Some amount of money has to be paid out as a part of GST compensation cess from the central government to the state government. But this money has not been paid, and this money has to be immediately paid so that the state governments have enough finances to conduct their economic activities, to conduct their schemes, to create or generate new economic activity. Now one might ask, the article basically talks about giving free food and cash transfer to the incomeless. How do we give the free food? This is pretty much possible because the food grains which we have at the moment are plentiful. In fact, the Food Corporation of India has 77 million tons of food grains. And in addition to this, we are also going for a rabi procurement of the rabi crop, which could add about 40 million tons. With so much of food grains in our storage, we can go forward and provide free food to the incomeless for a period of about 3 months very comfortably. Now, in the process of doing so, what we are doing is basically providing support to the people during the times of distress. But once this distress dissipates, once this COVID-19 problem dissipates as such, when the economy returns to normalcy, these people will start generating their income, and then they will start producing more, and this generates the economic activity. And at this point of time, you have to go for cash transfers, which will increase the disposable income in their hands, and this money is going to spur the demand. This is going to create the demand in the economy, which is going to lead to more generation of goods and services and lead to a virtuous cycle of higher GDP growth and higher incomes of people as such. Now this article moves forward and talks about the concept of homegrown growth, or the growth that is generated internally. Firstly, because of the lockdown, a lot of migrant workers have returned to their home. Some of them have taken the trains, some of them did it through walk, and some of them had faced several hardships in their way home. But almost all of them have returned to their homes. And it is quite unlikely that they are going to go back to their places of work anytime soon. In such a situation, there is going to be a situation of unemployment in the rural areas, because these people, these migrant workers who have gone home, do not have any work. In addition to this, there is also going to be a problem of globalization, as in, because of COVID-19, after COVID-19, the globalization that we are going to have is not going to be as much as we used to have some time ago. So there is no globalization scenario that is basically visible in the times to come. In such a situation, it is very important for us to improve the domestic economy. We have to generate economic growth by increasing demand within our own economy. And this is called as the homegrown growth. And this homegrown growth can be spurred by two entities. One is the urban counterpart and the two is the rural counterpart, which is to say that the rural India on its part can lead to this homegrown growth, and the urban India as well can lead to this homegrown growth. This article basically talks about the rural growth. Firstly, it says that agricultural growth is that which can spur the demand in the economic activity in the short run and in the long run. So it has to be urgently boosted. So whatever measures that the government has taken for agricultural growth over a period of time, be it in terms of doubling farmers' income, be it in terms of PM Asha scheme, etc., etc., all these things have to be implemented strictly so that the agricultural growth can be boosted. In addition to this, for all those migrant workers who have returned home to their rural areas, employment has to be provided by giving Manrega work. So Manrega work has to be resumed as soon as possible in the rural areas, and wages should be paid to these Manrega workers immediately without any delay. By doing so, we are going to increase the disposable income in the hands of the people in rural India, which will ultimately create demand in the economy. Some other suggestions are given by this particular article to spur the homegrown growth. Firstly, we have to get rid of the 100-day limit which is currently there under the Manrega Act. Under the Manrega Act, currently what we have is a 100-day limit. We cannot provide an employment for more than 100 days as such. And this limit has to go, and employment has to be provided on demand without any limit. In addition to this, we also have to boost the agriculture and the construction work in the rural areas, and Manrega work should also encompass the rural enterprises which are set up by the panchayats. Currently, Manrega Act basically covers the agricultural and the construction work, for which it basically gives out payments. But this Manrega work should also include rural enterprises which have been started by the panchayats. And this is going to empower the panchayats as such, and this is actually a very successful model in China. In China, it is called as the Township and the Village Enterprises scheme. And this particular scheme was very successful in China, in which the panchayats or the local governments in China have set up rural enterprises and made sure that they functioned very well, made sure that they were engines of growth in the local governments, in the local areas. And the same model can be employed in India by bringing the rural enterprises set up by the panchayats under the ambit of Manrega. And in addition to this, how do we provide funds to these rural enterprises set up by the panchayats? Public banks or the public sector banks should provide credit to these panchayat owned enterprises so that they function well. So in this way, we are going to empower the local people in the rural areas, and at the same time, we are going to empower the local governments in the rural areas. This is going to lead to a rural growth which is going to spur the homegrown growth. So how do we change the urban scenario at the moment so that the urban counterpart or the urban people in India will lead to the growth? This is by simply boosting the MSME sector. In urban areas, the most important sector is the MSME sector because it employs a lot of people. And among the migrant workers that are there, a lot of them have gone home, which is true, but some of them have also remained in the urban areas. These people have to be provided employment. These people have to be provided employment, especially in the MSMEs, so that they derive income as much as possible, so that they have strong and good livelihood. In addition to this, we have to start this urban employment guarantee program, which should be analogous to the Manrega in the rural areas. This employment guarantee program should be able to provide employment to the people on demand, and urban local bodies have to be roped into this particular scheme so that employment can be generated in the urban areas. So by having a jobs scheme in the urban areas and by reviving Manrega scheme in the rural areas, we can overall boost the economic activity in the country, is what this article tells us. Having talked about homegrown growth, we move forward and talk about the different sources of revenue for India in order to create this kind of economic activity. The first source of income is by printing money. Usually in normal terms, printing money is not good because this is going to lead to inflation as such. But because of these dire situations, it is wise for us to print some amount of money to spur the economic activity. And the second thing that we have to do is to make sure that our revenues are increased. How will the government increase its revenues? One way to increase the revenues is to basically increase the wealth tax or the inheritance taxation. Wealth tax has been abolished in India, by the way. Now this can be resumed so that money can be generated, revenues can be generated for the government, and this money can be in turn used to give to the rural and the urban people as such. In addition to this, we can go for corporate taxations. We can go for multinational companies and ask them to pay a good amount of tax on par with the local companies. The multinational companies as such do not pay as much tax as the local companies do, and we can make a rule such that these multinational companies also pay a good amount of tax. This is going to generate more amount of revenues for the government. Now one might ask, if we start taxing these multinational companies or the MNCs, this is going to lead to a flight of capital. Now that is not the case, is what this article argues, because India is at present the growing economy. All the economies are in shambles, be it in the west or in the east. The Chinese economy is doing moderately well, but India at the moment has basically the potential to be the engine of growth as such. Because even if the Chinese economy is doing well, no country wants to go and invest in China because of the Korona scare. So India provides the opportunity for investment, and so even if we ask the multinational companies to pay a bit more tax, it is not going to hurt India, because India provides an opportunity for growth. India provides an opportunity or market for these multinational companies. So these are the resources or the funding measures that the government can employ in order to improve the economic activity in the country, is what this article is telling us. Now let's move on to the next article. So now we will discuss two articles clubbed together. The titles of the articles are Liquidity Lifeline and Major Stimulus Package for MSMEs. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan or ABA, and the dimension is related to the first tranche of announcements that have been given by the Finance Minister. So we need to have a brief background of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or the new economic reforms package that has been announced in recent times. So this is basically a package of 20 lakh crores, which is about 10% of the GDP, which was announced by the Prime Minister in order to revive the economic activity. Its main focus is to reform the land, labor and liquidity reforms or liquidity laws that are there in order to spur the economic activity. So certain bold reforms are going to be taken under this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Some of them are, firstly, we are going to improve our supply chain reforms in relation to agriculture. This is going to support the agriculture by decreasing the perishability and increasing the connectivity between the rural India or the place of harvest to the consumer or the market. The second reform under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan or ABA is related to rational tax system, so that it is going to create good amount of revenues for the government by widening the tax base and at the same time without any harassment of the people who pay tax. The third reform is related to having simple and clear laws which can be implemented fastly and efficiently. Nextly, we will improve the capability of human resources that are there, and we will develop our human capital. And the last thing under ABA is to have a strong financial system in which banks will act as lifeblood of the economy as such. Now we will see what this article is trying to tell us. So with this background, we will look into what this article basically tells us. This article basically analyzes the two measures in relation to MSMEs and in relation to NBFCs, and the analysis of the government reforms or the economic reforms which are set out or which are intended for these two sectors of MSMEs and NBFCs. So this article basically says that the measures that are announced will go a long way in lifting the spirits of the two key sectors of the economy. The two key sectors being the MSMEs and the NBFCs or the non-banking finance companies. So as a part of these economic reforms, the government has announced certain measures for each of these sectors. For MSMEs, it has given certain measures, and for NBFCs, it is giving some amount of capital infusion. This article basically analyzes each of these two measures. First, in relation to MSMEs. In relation to MSMEs, the government has basically announced 3 lakh crore of collateral free assistance to the MSMEs so that they can immediately start their operations. So there is going to be a sovereign credit guarantee for the money that has been taken by the MSMEs. So even if the money taken by MSME is not paid by the MSME because of various reasons, then the government will chip in and pay the money back, which is why we call it as the sovereign credit guarantee. With this assurance, banks will move forward and start lending leaps and bounds to the MSME sector, and this is going to spur the economic activity in the MSME sector. And next, this article moves forward that this economic reforms in relation to the MSME could have been a bit better. This sovereign credit guarantee scheme that has been launched could have extended to the end of the financial year instead of until October 31. So what did the government say? The government say that this scheme is going to stay till October 31. Instead of that, you should have it till the end of the year is what this article suggests. The second thing is, the government basically said that it is going to go for sovereign credit guarantee, but it did not place any cap on the interest of the loan which the banks are going to give. So this might lead to a situation in which the banks will lend to the MSMEs but at a higher rate of interest, and this could have been curtailed by having a cap on the interest rate is what this article is trying to tell us. So these are the two suggestions which this article gives us in relation to MSME reforms. First is to extend the scheme to the end of financial year so that people or MSME as such will be able to derive benefit. The second thing is to have an interest cap on the loans taken so that the banks do not lend at exorbitant interest rates. Right. Next, let us move us to the steps that have been taken by the government in relation to NBFCs. In relation to NBFCs, housing finance firms and microfinance entities, the government has said that it is going to infuse an amount of 30,000 crores under this scheme. So with this amount of capital infusion, these entities will start functioning well. The NBFCs and the housing finance firms will start functioning well, and now they will be able to lend more. And because of this lending, there is going to be higher economic activity in the country, and this is going to boost the GDP as such. These are the 2 points this article talks about, one in relation to NBFCs and the second in relation to the MSMEs as such. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the present article is Provide Income Support and Restore Jobs. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. The issue is related to scrapping of labor laws, and the dimension is the impact of scrapping of labor laws on the economy. Now if you can recall, we have discussed how different states were trying to amend the labor laws in order to boost the economic activity, but this is coming at the cost of the rights of the labor. So we have discussed this in detail for quite a bit in the previous daily news analysis. Now we will see different dimensions, a different dimension that is related to this particular issue of amending the labor laws. So what does this article talk about? This article talks about the following themes. Firstly, it talks about the steps taken by Uttar Pradesh government, Madhya Pradesh government and Gujarat. And next it talks about how the rationalization of labor laws or how the amendment of labor laws against the rights of the workers is not going to bode well for the economy. Firstly, it talks about how different states have amended their labor laws. For example, the government of Uttar Pradesh has introduced an ordinance, and through this ordinance, it has scrapped most of the labor laws that were there in this particular state for about a period of 3 years. So what happens when you scrap the labor laws? When you scrap the labor laws, it is going to get rid of all the norms or obligations which these firms have towards their workers. Like for example, the labor laws were in place in order to protect the rights of the workers, right? Labor laws make sure that there is 1. Occupational safety, 2. Good health and working conditions, 3. There is regulation of hours of work, and then labor laws also ensure proper settlement of industrial disputes. Now, once these labor laws are removed, all these kinds of safeties which the workers have, be it occupational safety or insurance safety or health and working condition safety, all these kinds of safety will go away. So this will bring the organized sector on par with the contract labor or the casual labor, because these people will have no rights as such. So after Uttar Pradesh government, even Madhya Pradesh government and Gujarat have quickly followed suit by scraping most of the labor laws that were there in their states for a period of 3 years. The basic idea behind this scraping is that this is going to increase the investment and this is going to increase the supply of goods and services in the economy at a minimal cost. So the firms will have lesser compliance cost, they will have lesser amount of money that they have to pay to the workers as such, because they will now go for contractualization, they will now go for lesser wages in order to produce as much as possible. And this has been possible because the labor laws have been removed by these states like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. So this effectively does what to the worker? The worker is stripped of his fundamental rights. And this is not good for the economy. It is not good for the fundamental right of the human being as such. But one must understand another important pertinent factor. So the main reason why the state governments are saying that they have scrapped the labor laws is because they want to increase the supply in the economy. They feel that the supply in the economy is less, because of which there is a need to produce more so that there is more supply in the economy. And in order to do so, they want to produce as much as possible, produce as much goods as possible at a lower cost by decreasing the wages, by going for contractualization of labor or casualization of labor. But one must understand that there is no supply crunch at the moment. So whatever crunch we have in the economy as such, even before COVID-19, was in the nature of demand crunch. Like for example, even before the COVID-19, the growth rates that were estimated in India were to the tune of just 4.7%. That was the report which the RBI gave, right? The RBI said that India was going to grow at a meager rate of 4.7% because there is no demand in the economy. So the problem is not that of supply. Even if you increase supply, who will purchase the goods which are in extra supply? Who will purchase the goods if they do not have enough money? So the idea or the basic concept is to increase the demand in the economy and not supply as such. Once the demand is increased, supply will increase automatically. You are not supposed to increase supply artificially. You are supposed to increase supply as and when the demand increases, is what this article says. So the first and foremost things you have to do is to ensure money in the hands of the people and the workers. And one way to do it is to ensure job security and income security to the workers, both of which are basically provided by the labor laws. But the sad part is the labor laws have been removed or scraped for a temporary period by these states. So the states, whatever they are doing it the reverse way. It what this article is trying to claim. What we are supposed to do is to provide income support to the workers, and we also have to restore their jobs and provide security to their jobs. Next, the article moves forward and talks about the kind of rationalization that we have to do in labor laws. Sure, you can rationalize the labor laws, but you have to rationalize in such a way that there is a delicate balance that is maintained between the firms as well as the interest of the workers. Otherwise, what happens is there will be a fertile breeding ground for the exploitation of the working class by the firms. And this is not good because already 90% of India's workforce is in informal jobs with no protection as such. If the remaining 10% of the organized workforce is also deprived of its rights, then India as such is not being able to take care of its workforce, and this does not bode well for the economy, or it does not bode well for the rights of the human being who are these workers. So the title for the above article is Vocal About Local but No Snub to Globalization. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to the post-COVID-19 economic order that is going to evolve in India, and the dimension is related to the new economic reforms package and the new economic order that is sought by the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister in his recent speech talked about the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is basically a self-reliant India. He has given his outline regarding the vision of a post-Corona world order. He basically talked about how the post-Corona world order is going to be, and he wanted to emphasize the concept of self-reliance for India and for people-centric globalization across the world. So this is the essence of the article. These are the themes that are discussed. So having talked about how the post-Corona world order is going to be, the Prime Minister has looked at India. He said that the vision of India was that of a self-reliant India. So he talked about three important things which we will list here. The first is the concept of import substitution. So this was already there during initial times of our independence. We went for import substitution, and now the Prime Minister wants to bring it back into the economic forefront. Through the process of import substitution, instead of importing from outside, we will start creating goods and services within our country itself, which will substitute that good which we probably would have imported from outside. So instead of importing, we will create our own. So this is going to boost the Make in India as such. This is going to create jobs and employment within India as such. So this is the concept of import substitution which the Prime Minister has talked about. Next is the concept of globalization, or the neo-globalization that is going to come forward in the wake of Corona crisis. After coronavirus, countries are quite skeptical about globalization as such. They are very skeptical about movement of people and personnel across the border, movement of goods across the border, and so on. In such a situation, the globalization that should evolve should not just be profit driven. It should also be people centric, is what the Prime Minister has said. And how do we make it people centric? The way to make it people centric is to be very helpful to other countries which are in need, especially when they need supplies in time of a crisis. Like for example, let's take the example of Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is very poor, and if a crisis, any kind of crisis hits the Sub-Saharan Africa, it won't be able to sustain its population. In such a situation, if we follow the concept of people-centric globalization, we will be able to provide supplies and the humanitarian relief that is required to bring the Sub-Saharan Africa from its crisis. And the basic essence of this kind of globalization, which is people-centric, is the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is basically an age-old dictum which India has followed for quite some time. This is the second concept which the Prime Minister has talked about, in addition to the import substitution, which was the first concept. Thirdly, he said that China's global supply chain should be countered by India. So China basically will increase its profits, will increase its economic footprint, especially after the COVID-19 crisis. If you look at the economic performances of the different countries that are there in the world, because of COVID-19 and the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions in different respective countries, almost all the economies are in shambles. Almost all the economic activity has stalled except for China. China is doing relatively well. China has gone for its export-led growth again. China has also increased its consumption-based growth, having stopped the crisis of Corona within its territory. So China is probably going to dominate the economic supply chain of the world, and this should not be allowed, is what the Prime Minister has said indirectly. Of course, he did not take the name of China, but he meant that it was China, and India's global supply chain will grow at the cost of China. And this is possible because countries as such are very trusting of India at the moment, because India is trying to provide support to all the countries, both moral and material, in the vicinity, especially in the South Asian region. In addition to this, the Prime Minister has said that the European countries and the United States should come for closer partnerships with India, so that a common platforms can be emerged in which the economic activity of the world as such can be spurred. So these are the three hopeful things or the important concepts which have been talked by the post-coronavirus economic order envisaged by the Prime Minister. One is the concept of import substitution, two is the new form of globalization which is people-centric, and three is China's global supply chain dominance has to be countered through Indian growth and through partnership with Western and European countries. But upon analyzing these three concepts which the Prime Minister has said, we can easily see that this is a wishful thinking and this is not so easy because India is severely limited by capital, by technology and by human resources. So that is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the present article is Requests for FB User Data by India up to 28%. The syllabus connection has been listed here. The issue is related to FB user data and the dimension is the increased requests by the government for user data. So there are two things this article talks about. Firstly, this article talks about the increasing requests of Indian governments for user data from Facebook. That is the first thing. And second thing is the disruption in the internet that we see in India, especially since the conversion of Jammu and Kashmir into the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. So these are the two themes that have been discussed by this article. So to start with, this article talks about how global governments in general, not just India, but global governments in general have increased their requests for user data. And this increase was seen from 128,000 to 140,000 approximately in 2019. In the last 6 months of 2019, the request from various governments for user data has increased by about 10%. Among the requests that are there, most of them came from the United States. That is, the US government has asked for the most amount of user data requests from the Facebook, and it is followed by India. And this has been pointed out by a US-based social media network. So a report was launched by this US-based social media network which has said that India is the second largest country in terms of the requests it asked from the Facebook. And the second point which this article points out is that about most number of internet disruptions that we see in India. So the Facebook has witnessed about 50 instances or 50 circumstances of internet disruptions affecting 11 countries. And among all these instances, most of them were found in India. India topped the list, accounting for 78% of such disruptions. So one might ask, why do governments ask for this kind of data? For security reasons, for the maintenance of law and order, in order to track criminals or crime or internet-based crime as such, the government might need requests of data. So it requests this data from the Facebook, and this is basically counted as a request by the government. That is one reason. And the reason why India has stopped internet disruptions in recent times is because of the conversion of Jammu and Kashmir into the Union Territory. In order to protect the security of that particular region, in order to preserve the law and order in that particular region, internet disruptions have become a norm in Jammu and Kashmir. This is a one-off scenario. Now this is what this article says. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title for the last article of our discussion is Army proposes 3-year stint for civilians. The syllabus connection has been listed here for your benefit. The issue is related to the concept of tour of duty and the dimension is the reorganization of army. So what does this article say? This article talks about the recent plan unraveled by army. Army is planning to take civilians on a 3-year contract called the tour of duty, or short service. This is about to be done on a trial basis to allow these civilians serve as officers and in other ranks for a limited period of time for a limited number of vacancies. Initially, it will be launched for a limited number of vacancies and then it will probably be upscaled. This is what the plan of the army is. This proposal is still under consideration. Of course, it has not been launched yet. Now we will list out certain benefits of this particular proposal. So what are the benefits of such a proposal? This will result in a significant reduction in the expenditure of the army. At present, if you look at the expenditure of the army, if you look at the expenditure of the defense budget, 60% of the defense budget is just going for the payment of pensions and other kinds of benefits to the army personnel. Now because most of the money is going for the pension payments, the army is left with less amount of money for its modernization. So in order to solve this problem, tour of duty or the short service will become very handy. It also provides good amount of incentive for the people from the best colleges to come and serve in the army. especially from the Indian Institutes of Technology, is what this article says. It says that this particular short service will also attract the best minds from all over the country. And in addition to this, this is important and useful for those people who do not want a full career in the army, but to want to have the uniform for quite some time or some period of time. So these are the benefits of this particular tour of duty scheme. In order to incentivize the entry of people into this short scheme, the army is basically opting for certain kinds of incentives. Several incentives are basically being planned, such as tax-free incomes for a period of 3 years, and at the end of 3 years after they finish their tour of duty, a lump sum amount of 5 to 6 lakhs will be paid for the officers and about 2 to 3 lakhs will be paid for the other people. So this is the essence of the article. The essence of the article is basically a short service on a trial basis is being considered by the army to cut down the manpower budget, which is consuming about 60% of its defense budget. So let us look at certain prelims MCQs. The first question is related to the concept of tour of duty, which we just discussed right now. So tour of duty mentioned in the news can be explained as A. A short service in the army for a period of 3 years. B. A tour for trainee civil servants to know practical issues. C. A refresher course for military personnel. And D is none of the above. We all know that the answer is option A. Now let's move on to the next question. Which of the following are announced by the finance minister as a part of 20 lakh crore package, stimulus package to fight COVID-19? So the first option is income tax rates were slashed by 10%. This is somewhat correct because it has been slashed by 10% from the existing 20% for all those people who earn between 5 lakh to 7 lakhs, 7.5 lakhs. But it has been slashed by 15% for those people earning between 7.5 lakhs to 10 lakhs, right? So a blanket figure of 10% is not right. So option 1 is wrong. So if option 1 is wrong, definitely options A, C and D are wrong. So the right answer is option B and which is to say option 2 and option 3 are right. Now this finishes our discussion. Thank you for your participation. We'll meet again.